Hey everybody, it's Jason with Parallel Reality coming back with you today with an article from the Federalist dated August 11th. It says, texts, Fauci and friends covered up concerns about the COVID vax and miscarriages. I mean, are you surprised at all that they covered stuff up from COVID? Because I certainly am not. So it says, the latest communications from the COVID czar obtained by the committees investigating him note concerns about mutations. So we can just add, I guess a lot more deaths to Anthony Fauci's record here from the miscarriages, but let's see what this article has to say. It says, Dr. Anthony Fauci privately raised concerns early on about the rapidly produced COVID vaccinations and their potential links to miscarriage despite very public assurances that there were no red flags, in scare quotes, according to a 2021 text chain released Monday by the committees investigating the disgraced fifth-taking COVID czar, Fifth Amendment taking. I almost thought it said filth-taking, and well, filth would kind of describe Anthony Fauci. It says, I asked around a bit more, and another issue came up that you need to be aware of. Since many people have significant cytokine storms and fever after the second dose of the vaccine, this theoretically could be associated with miscarriage in the first trimester, Fauci wrote in a January 25th, 2021 text on his government-issued cell phone. Yeah, so that's discoverable if the government ever has to have a Senate hearing over it, or there's some kind of investigation. Like, they're going to find that out. It says, the alarming messages between the former National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases director, Rochelle Walensky, she was then director of the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention in the Biden administration, and Vivek Murthy, former U.S. Surgeon General under Presidents Barack Obama, Donald Trump, and Joe Biden, are among a trench of new Fauci communications obtained by Senators Ron Johnson, Republican of Wisconsin, and Rand Paul, Republican of Kentucky. Paul is chairman of the Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs Committee. Johnson chairs the Permanent Subcommittee on Investigations. Murthy took comfort in Fauci's expertise. I've been hearing the concern about the mRNA causing mutations in the developing fetus as well. That's a really good point regarding the cytokine storm post-second dose, Murthy wrote the group. And, well, the text is right there on the screen if you happen to be looking at it. It says, all told, the trove includes some 34,000 text messages and 522 voicemails, according to the Republican committee leaders. I don't think I've sent 34,000 text messages since I started texting people. And voicemails, probably not even that many either. I don't know. That seems like a lot, especially in like the last 5 years. That's definitely not the case. Anyway, this seems like a real lot, but I guess when there's a supposed pandemic going on, there's going to be a lot of messages of all kinds going back and forth. It says, like Fauci's COVID-era government diary entries released late last month, the narcissistic NIAID chief's phone messages further suggest he and fellow federal public health officials covered up inconvenient truths about their handling of the virus and the rush job they did on pushing a relatively untested vaccine on a public in panic. And that should have probably been everyone's first clue that maybe things weren't going to be great. It was because they're trying to push a vaccine on people that hasn't been tested. That's kind of a problem. Anyway, it says, well, I guess we're getting into that section now here. It says, well, are the vaccines safe? And it says, agree with Rochelle. There are no data or theoretical reason to believe that vaccinating early versus later in pregnancy would be preferred. Yet, some people, even female healthcare professionals, feel concerned about injecting a genetic vaccine very early in pregnancy, Fauci wrote to the group at 4:57 p.m. on January 25th, 2021, roughly a month and a half after the first COVID vaccines were first rolled out to the public. There is this misperception out there that we need to deal with that mRNAs somehow can get into your genes. When the misperception gets extended to an early developing fetus, the anxiety heightens, Fauci added. But just days later, on February 3rd, 2021, the COVID czar was publicly insisting that the Food and Drug Administration had, to that point, discovered no red flags about pregnant women. And text is right there in the green in the middle of the screen. Scroll down here at this point. It says federal health officials still had no public concerns with the vax on August 11th of that year, when the CDC strengthened its recommendation for pregnant women to get vaccinated against COVID-19. CNN dutifully reported, because of course CNN are going to be the good soldiers for anything considered left-wing, and they're going to go ahead and just say everything's fine. And they're still doing it today. As the corporate news outlet noted, the agency had previously been vague in its recommendation, stating, if you are pregnant, you can receive a COVID-19 vaccine. Nothing about the miscarriage concerns, Fauci noted to the pandemic gang in late January. So we are not seeing a signal of safety concerns of the vaccine in pregnancy, Sasha Ellington, team lead for emergency preparedness and response in the CDC's Division of Reproductive Health, told CNN at the time. It says by August 30th, as Fauci's ego was nearly exploding from all the attention and acclaim he was receiving, the smiling NIAID director was telling the What to Expect podcast audience that pregnant women should get vaccinated. As well, are the vaccines safe? Fauci asked before answering his own question. There's tens and tens and tens of thousands of women who have been followed by the CDC, who have been vaccinated when they're pregnant. There's no indication whatsoever that there's any increase of any adverse issues in a pregnant woman who is vaccinated compared to a pregnant woman who wasn't vaccinated. He told the show's fawning host Heidi Murkoff, it's pretty clear that pregnant women should get vaccinated. Didn't seem so clear a few months prior. So he knew there was going to be a problem, and he just kind of went, oh well, I'm going to tell everybody everything's fine. Like, it's quite literally the Naked Gun scene where Leslie Nielsen's standing in front of the fireworks shop where everything's going off, and he's going, there's nothing to see here. So the next section says, did you see the announcement today? It says, for pregnant women considering getting the vaccine, are you aware of any data or theoretical reason why vaccinating early versus late in pregnancy would be preferred? And any sense of when there will be more robust data on vaccine risk in pregnant women? Murthy wrote in the January 21 text chain. Fauci weighed in with his thoughts on the vaccine's theoretical associations to miscarriage in the first trimester. So I've been telling pregnant women that there hasn't been evidence of concerning adverse outcomes in the trials through the number of pregnant, or as though the number of pregnant subjects was likely to have been limited, Murthy continued. And here's the text here in the blue again. This is Murthy followed up the next day with a startling text. Tony, Rochelle, did you see this announcement today from the World Health Organization saying they advise against pregnant women taking the Moderna vaccine because of lack of data? It has led to a flurry of questions. What is your take? I imagine we will all get asked about this, he wrote. Murthy included a link to the WHO site. And once again, here is the text from that. It says, Fauci shrugged off the WHO's concerns, telling the pandemic gang that, as with any vaccine in which data are lacking in pregnant women, one must weigh the potential risks against the benefits. So that seems to have been his pat answer to any critic with concerns about the relative versus absolute risks of getting, or not getting, the shot. As COVID-19 can be a serious disease, especially in pregnancy. In the vaccine trials, pregnant women were not allowed, but following the EUA, which is the Emergency Use Authorization, a large number, more than 10,000, pregnant women have been vaccinated, Fauci wrote. No issues have arisen. The FDA and the ACIP, that's the Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices, and the ACOG, that's American College of Obstetricians, there we go, and Gynecologists, are all permissive for pregnant women to have a choice. Animal tox studies did not raise any red flags. So that's the science Americans were shamed into following. With limited tracking, the experts pronounced the vaccine safe for pregnant women and their unborn babies. No red flags. And the experts kept pushing the vaccine for healthy people. Critics assert the consequences were severe. And here's a post from Sean Davis, who is, I think, the number 2, or might even be the number 1, but I think he's the number 2 over at the Federalist himself. And he just says, Fauci is the modern Joseph Mengele, an utter psychopath responsible for the deaths of millions under the guise of practicing medicine. I mean, that's harsh, but he's not really far off. Says he knew what he was doing would lead directly to babies dying, and he did it anyway, lying about it the whole time. Fauci must be put on trial for mass murder. Yeah, he absolutely should be put on trial. In fact, I can't say on here what I want to have happen to him, but let's just say the cartels in Mexico have a very good way of dealing with doing what I would want done to him. Says riddled with conflicts is the next section here. It says it is difficult to conceive of a more egregious breach of medical ethics by the government-controlled medical industrial complex than the systematic promotion of COVID-19 vaccination to pregnant women, thereby, through transplacental transfer, effectively vaccinating their unborn and newborn children. James A. Thorpe, an obstetrician gynecologist, told the Permanent Investigations Subcommittee in written testimony. Deception, the doctor alleged, was the name of the game for the Vax Masters. Thorpe noted the now infamous Shimabukuro, I cannot say that, Shimabukuro study, there we go, that was published on April 21st, 2021 in the digital version of the New England Journal of Medicine. The authors claimed a miscarriage rate of 12.6%, but the raw data revealed an 82% miscarriage rate in women vaccinated during the first trimester. That's basically an abortion shot is what they took in that case. That's a ridiculously high percentage. And so Thorpe wrote that and says this is consistent with the 81% miscarriage rate noted in the Pfizer 5.3.6 postmark data. Yeah, oh, they absolutely knew that this was a thing. I mean, that's nuts. It says, in short, the high rates of miscarriage associated with the vaccines mirror the effects of chemical abortion, as I was just saying. That's what the OBGYN claim. That's that Thorpe guy. And then Rand Paul, embedded text here, says, just Fauci was saying one thing in public and one thing in private. We'll skip past that. We don't know how Rand Paul feels about him. It says, in the same edition of the New England Journal of Medicine, Walensky and the journal's editor-in-chief, Eric Rubin, published an op-ed. The two published pieces were riddled with conflicts of interest and deliberate misrepresentations intended to coerce pregnant women into taking the vaccine, Thorpe wrote. But the CDC stands by COVID vaccinations for pregnant women, asserting that studies have shown no increased risk for complications like miscarriage, preterm delivery, stillbirth, or birth defects. The agency cites a long list of benefits, particularly the vaccines reducing the risk of severe illness associated with the virus. I don't really think the vaccines did much of anything, to be perfectly honest, but okay. Says the dominant research backs up the CDC, but the assertion that there is no evidence that COVID-19 vaccines are associated with an increased risk of miscarriage is certainly not universally accepted. One key study purportedly left out research data that showed the vaccines caused significant harms to pregnant women and infants. As the more I've looked into this, my eyes have opened up in terms of the lack of proper studies, Wisconsin Senator Ron Johnson told me Monday on the Jason Gotch show in Milwaukee. That must be the author of the article. I didn't even look. See, I don't think we're that far from the end. Nope, that's not. It's someone named Matt Kittle. Anyway, it says, we have been lied to repeatedly, the Permanent Subcommittee on Investigations chairman added. The Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs Committee last week, on an 8-5 party line vote, approved holding Fauci in contempt of Congress after the COVID czar invoked his Fifth Amendment right against the self-incrimination more than 100 times while under oath before the committee. The matter now heads to the Department of Justice for review. Johnson cast one of the yes votes, asserting that Fauci didn't just hold Congress in contempt, he held the American people in contempt. And Ron Johnson said there are so many legitimate questions that must be answered. Some of those questions only he can answer, the senator said. As we have quotes from him earlier saying he's not concerned about congressional oversight. He'll appear before any congressional committee. He's not afraid of anything. Well, that proved untrue. Yeah, because he's trying to stand on the fact that, no, I did everything right. I'm not to be blamed for this. And he's hiding behind the Fifth Amendment, which, according to law people, because I am not a lawyer, and I don't know the law, but apparently he really can't do, and that's why he's being held in contempt of Congress, is because, he has, he's protected against self-incrimination, so he literally cannot get himself in trouble, but you're supposed to be talking. You're not supposed to not be saying anything, and that's the problem here. So I've already made it known what I want to have happen to the guy. But, this is horrible that he did this to, mothers, and they lost their babies if they took the shot. Meanwhile, he's going and telling everybody that everything's fine. So let me know what you think about this in the comments below. Please like, share, and subscribe, and I will talk to you soon. Bye.